Hello, everybody. This is Kim Scott.
And Ernest Adams. Hi, Kim.
Hey, Ernest. How are you?
Today is a challenging day. It's February 1st. It was the funeral. I watched the funeral today for Tyree, and that was incredibly. It brought up a lot of emotions for me.
Yeah.
I think this last week has really brought up a lot of emotions for me and hopefully everyone living in this country and
Yeah.
and everyone who is a human. And then I'm conflicted with the beginning of Black History Month because I cringe at the beginning of Black History Month because I don't like seeing the commercialization on
Yeah.
LinkedIn where every company comes out with their obligatory statement.
Yeah.
Like I'm only Black in February.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I had those two things that were really at odds today. So I'm in a pretty vulnerable and raw place
Yeah.
as I think
No,
about today.
I feel you, Ernest. As you know, I grew up in Memphis, and
Yes.
I spent a lot of time looking at his photographs of Memphis, of
Yes.
a lot of
Yes.
places that I love, and
Yes.
I just it is so hard to understand why police forces haven't gotten this under control, haven't managed to figure out how to prevent this from continually happening.
Well, it just speaks
Um,
how systemic it is, right? And I think,
yeah,
the fact that this was five Black police officers is, honestly, when it happened, we didn't know the race of the police officers at that time. And then a couple of days later,
yeah,
when it came out that it was five Black police officers, I was flabbergasted and in shock because
yeah,
my immediate assumption was that it was white police officers,
yeah.
which I
No,
had to,
me too.
right, which I had to check my bias at that point to really think
Yeah,
about that. But then when I found out it was Black police officers, I then began to say, what happened to those five Black men
yeah,
that they could do what they did to another Black man?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that brought up a lot of emotions and fear and anger and recognition of the system of justice and how broken it really is. But also it makes you really think about how people are programmed.
yeah, yeah. And how systems impact
Yes.
how people act.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
interesting. I was in Memphis shortly after the murder of George Floyd, and I remember saying I was taking a walk with my brother and saying, I bet this wouldn't happen in Memphis because it's a majority Black
Right.
city, and the police there's better representation, I assume, although I don't actually know the numbers on the police force,
Yes.
and clearly that was wrong.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and there's did you read the book Corruptible?
I didn't.
It's a really interesting book, and at the beginning, or at one point in the book, the author describes the difference between the way that police forces in the U.S. tend to recruit
Mm,
and who they're trying to recruit, and the recruiting videos often look like clips from Rambo, frankly,
right. Right.
and then he compares that to the way that the police force in New Zealand recruits,
Hmm.
and it's like it's a totally different deal.
Yes. Yes.
And you got to think that's part of what's going on. Then he also talks a lot about sort of the way that the military gives excess military equipment to police,
Police.
and
Yeah.
that can't help.
No,
That
absolutely not.
all feeds into
Absolutely.
the system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for all of our listeners, everyone that's hearing, I hope that you're taking care of your mental health as we watch these horrific videos that have been released. I've been really reading a lot around kind of the trauma on Black people watching videos like this and the
Yeah,
PTSD that a Black person goes through after
yeah,
having watched that. And so it just really begs the question of ensuring that you have people around you that you can talk about these things with. You have support systems, that you cry when you need to cry, you scream when you need to scream, and recognize that this does not affect our individual self-worth.
yeah.
Um, but as a collective, we have to do better, and we have to love each other better, and we have to support each other better. So,
Yeah, and I would say to the people listening who are not Black or who are white like me to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to become part of the solution here.
Hmm.
Like a simple thing, a bunch of neighborhood watch signs
Yeah.
appeared in my neighborhood, and I have been fighting because they're just racist. I mean,
Right.
is what it appears to me. And
Yes.
like even that's very different thing from this kind of police violence that we're talking about. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're doing what you can do to remind people that we got to
Yeah.
change this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, appreciate the time to just kind of recognize where we're both at today as
Yeah.
we, continue on a journey of conversation around radical respect. And I think that's what we need is radical respect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly right. Well, so should I read? So one of the things I've been editing. I've been deleting. Actually, I'm no longer writing. I'm in deleting phase, and I was rereading the section on what leaders can do about prejudice. I feel pretty good
Hmm.
about the section on what leaders can do about bias and what leaders can do about bullying, but the section on prejudice, I
It's
need some
tough.
help. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna read maybe just a couple of paragraphs and then get your words of wisdom. Is that all right,
Great.
Ernest?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So here you go. Prejudice, how leaders can prevent it from destroying respect. Leaders can't control what people believe. Trying to be the thought police is a giant overstep. People are free to believe whatever they want, but they are not free to do or say whatever they want, at least not at work. Freedom is not chaos or a free for all or a right to be cruel. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. said of freedom that your right to swing your arms ends just where the other man's sick nose begins. More or less, the same thing can be said of prejudices. You can believe whatever you want, but you cannot impose those beliefs on others. It's a leader's job to make it clear to everyone where that line between your beliefs and your efforts to impose them on others lies. When leaders teach their teams to hold up a mirror to bias, usually the result is self correction. But in the case of prejudice, if you hold up a mirror, the person is likely to say, "Yeah, that's me. Aren't I good looking?" Pointing out a prejudice probably isn't going to change it. What then can leaders do to prevent prejudice from hurting collaboration and respect on their teams? Here are two ideas. Implementing them won't fix everything, but it will take you a long way in the right direction. One, make a rule book for respect. Two, make the consequences for violating the rules clear and then invest in the investigation process fair. All right, so Ernest, help me out here because this is a tough one.
It's a really tough one. And I have been the proponent of telling companies and leaders all the time that, we, we don't want people to bring their full selves to work many times,
Yeah,
right? Particularly
yeah,
if their full self is a racist, bigoted, prejudiced person,
yeah,
right? You can
yeah,
leave that part of you at home,
yeah.
but bring the part that does your job well to work. Now, having said that, I also understand that there are parts of this country and parts of this world where the talent pool is largely made up of prejudiced people.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, in order to fill seats, fill jobs, we're going to have some of these people inside of our organizations. And so, as a leader, how do you think about bringing people with diverse points of view together to be able to talk about these things to really optimize the working environment? Um, I do think, Kim, that there's some things that leaders should stay away from.
Yes, yeah, there we 100% agree. And also, I want to say diverse points of view is different from prejudices. Like a prejudice, it is a belief. It's a belief that a stereotype is true.
Mhm.
And I actually, in fact, in an earlier version of this book, I called it belief, not
Yes.
prejudice. And
Yes.
then I got away from that because it's like not all beliefs are bad,
That's
obviously.
true. That's true.
And so some beliefs are. I mean, I would say that a prejudiced belief is an incorrect belief. Actually,
Yes. Yes.
um, it's wrong,
Yes.
both sort of in terms of logic and in terms of morality. Uh,
Hmm.
and but how do you deal with those wrong beliefs, those
Yeah,
specifically prejudiced beliefs?
yeah. Although I will say, Kim, I found that there's times where people are prejudice, without
Prejudice, yeah.
prejudice without having a belief behind it.
So say more about that. Like, what are you
So
thinking?
I have had conversations with people who started by saying, I don't like black people. And as
Wow.
I began to probe and ask questions and get into that conversation, they don't like black people because that is what they were taught,
Yeah.
not to like
Yeah.
black people. They
Yeah.
didn't have a belief that black people were bad or that black
Mhm.
people, they just were taught, I just don't like black people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right, and that I found was really unfounded. And as you began to talk and as you began to explain experiences,
Yeah.
you then, going back to when we talked about being programmed just a few minutes ago, that is how they were programmed without truly developing a belief system around that.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll say things that are prejudiced that they don't really believe if you make them stop to think.
To
So
think
it's almost like a bias. I mean, it's a stated bias. It's somewhere between, it's on the bias side of bias and prejudice.
it is, but here's the thing, Kim. If we were to automatically say that we are going to remove people who have prejudiced points of view, we
Mhm.
would never get to the point of having the discussion to understand that those people are really just a little bit more biased. Their
Yeah.
belief is more biased
Yeah.
than it is prejudice, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
that for me that's this work. That is the
Yeah.
work of really us beginning to help people see the light and understand there's a shared humanity that we have that is the underlying belief.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
this bias that sits on top of it.
Yeah. So I agree. We don't want to exclude everyone who has a prejudice from the
Hmm.
workplace.
Hmm.
Totally agree. In part because it gives us an opportunity to confront and challenge and question that prejudice
Yes,
and maybe to change that belief.
absolutely.
Uh, that,
Absolutely.
but also sort of because I think that it is an overstep of leaders to say I get to control what people believe. Um,
That I agree.
so there's that. Having said that, like let's take some, maybe the one of the things I recommend in the book is take some specific examples.
Yes.
And say where would you as a leader draw the line, and then how would you articulate that in a rule book for respect or rules of engagement or code of
Hmm.
conduct or however you want to call it.
Yes.
So for example, if I were in charge of a company, if I were
Yes.
the CEO of a company, I would say that it is okay to wear, it's in fact encouraged to wear things like Black Lives Matter
Hmm.
t-shirts,
Hmm.
but it is not okay to wear a t-shirt with a Confederate flag on it. Because Black Lives Matter to me is a human rights movement, and the Confederate flag is sort of valorizing, slavery, which violated human rights. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a slippery slope, Kim. I think, for the record, I agree. My rational brain agrees with everything you just said.
Uh huh.
However, what I would say is that was put through your filter
Yes.
of thinking about a Confederate flag in a very specific point of view,
Yes.
where some people could say a Black Lives Matter T-shirt. I hear Black Lives Matter. Look, you know, please, for any listener, please do not think that I am defending people like the governor of Florida for his
Right.
rejection of critical race theory or
Right.
anything like that, right? Because I think it is absolutely asinine. However, I do believe that we have to understand the points of view by which people are coming from in
Yeah.
order to really get into a deep debate and conversation around it, right? So if people are viewing Black Lives Matter through the lens of exactly what you said about the Confederate flag,
Yeah.
someone is viewing Black Lives Matter to think about it as a very violent or aggressive movement,
Mm-hmm.
then, and they're
But
not
it's
looking at it.
but factually, it was not a violent movement. was peaceful protests in response to violence. Like
100%.
like
Yes,
like
yes,
like I have no trouble having that conversation.
yes, yes. But Kim, how do you then enter into I mean, this is where I get caught up in this section, right?
Yeah.
Because as a practitioner of diversity, equity, inclusion, as a practitioner
Mhm.
of the work,
Mhm.
I very much hold to a point of view that I want to enter into as many conversations that I can with people.
Yeah.
I, in fact, want to understand their core belief systems. I, in fact, want to facilitate conversation and dialogue that allows each other to understand their basic humanity, their core humanity.
Yeah.
And if I immediately begin to say to people, well, because you wore that, I'm putting you in this box over here.
Well, you could say you cannot wear it again. You don't have to fire them for the first offense because it's going to be
Yes.
something new in a year.
Yeah.
Some new T-shirts will be
I,
printed up.
no,
You
I mean,
know.
I told you I had this instance, Kim, where I had, I mean, this exact same thing, right? I think in a couple podcasts ago, where we had a factory in right outside of Tampa,
Hmm.
and it was June and it was Gay Pride Month, but it was in the middle of a presidential campaign, and so we had someone
Yeah.
wear a Gay Pride T-shirt, and we had someone wear a MAGA hat, a Make
Yeah, and I
America Great
had
Again
no
hat.
trouble saying one's okay and the other's not. I have
Right,
no
and
trouble.
we as an organization did as well. I had to really step back though and say, okay, look, I get it, right? And that was a
Hmm.
little bit more finite because we could say political,
Yeah.
non-political. The employee, in fact, argued with us though and said, no, I look at that gay pride flag as political.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
But
fact that
again,
you allow, yeah,
it has nothing to do with the presidential elect. Like we can have that conversation. Like that's
we, yeah,
and I think I mean, the thing is this, like as when I am engaged in DEI work, when you are
yes,
engaged in DEI work, it's kind of our job to have those conversations.
absolutely, absolutely,
But if someone is, let's say, a customer service rep at a company and they just want to go in and get their job done and go home, it is not
hmm
their job. And so I think what you want to do as a DEI professional is create an environment where someone can go to work without having other people's prejudiced beliefs imposed upon them. Um, and so if
yes,
somebody like wore a t-shirt that said something, I'm trying to think like about religion, because
yeah.
this is where,
The
go
only
ahead.
challenge I would make for you, Kim, though, is that isn't it every leader's job to be a DEI practitioner?
Yes, but it's also a leader's job, every leader's job. But what about the
Yes,
person who's not a leader? What about the employee? The employee
absolutely,
who wants to go to work
right,
and not have the person sitting next to them wearing a hat that says all lives matter.
right, right.
Like that, and that feels to me like anytime someone is doing something that is creating a hostile work environment, they are imposing prejudiced beliefs on others, and
hmm
it should be in the rights of the leaders to say stop it or get fired.
Yes, yes,
I
yes, yes.
think. I don't know
I,
though.
I agree with you. This is the work. This is the conversation because there are people, and I've encountered them, and I will continue to encounter them, who will say to me, "But Ernest, looking at a Black Lives Matter T-shirt does create a hostile environment for me because my belief is not that Black Lives Matter. My belief is that all lives matter." And so that creates a hostile environment for me, which again, that is not my belief, but these are conversations that I enter into. And so it becomes a very
Yeah,
slippery slope, right?
yeah. I think though the difference is, and this is why in the last part of the book I talk about kind of the dynamics. There's a big difference between being white and being black in this country. Like I have a
No
white
doubt.
son and I am never afraid that when he starts to drive, he'll be stopped
Yes,
by a cop and killed.
of
I'm
course.
just it's not one of the things that I am afraid of.
Of
And
course.
that matters. Like that
hmm
really matters. And so
Yeah.
what creates, there's a big difference between feeling uncomfortable at
Yes.
disagreement and being afraid of violence,
Yes.
being legitimately afraid of violence.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I guess where I'm going with this, Kim, ultimately is to say, how do we, because there is so much DEI fatigue,
Yeah.
particularly in America,
Yeah.
because the work for the last several decades has been rooted in fear, or has been rooted in, if you do this, you are now out.
Yeah.
And we have parts of the population, largely cisgender heterosexual white men, who have now said, I don't want to talk about this anymore because I've been made to feel like my points of view don't matter and I'm wrong. And so how do we get back to a place where we create an environment where all are comfortable at the table expressing how I feel, so that we can actually not cause the brain to go into fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
but instead cause the brain to be able to relax and our nervous systems to relax, so we can actually discuss and
Yeah.
have conversations around humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is having some rules of engagement and knowing, like, maybe you disagree with the rules, but make the rules clear. Like
Yeah.
what you can and cannot do or say, what you can, and this is not like an endless, like, in the
Yeah.
end my rule book for respect was 5 lines, and
Yes. Yes. Yes.
but it needs to give us some guidelines. And I don't know how, I sound like I'm arguing with you. I don't know how to
No, you don't at all.
articulate this.
No, you
I
don't
don't
at all.
know.
But I mean, you talk about this in your next paragraph, and I would say when you talk about writing a rule book for respect, it's less to me about the actual 5 rules that you end up with, and it's more
Yeah.
about the conversations that are facilitated to get to those rules.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And knowing going into it that as a leader, when I began to set out to develop a rule book for respect, I'm going to have people with opposing views. And
Yeah.
that is part of the process to get to a place where we can ultimately, because if I were to just come and say, here's our rules of respect, I don't care how you think about this, your point of view doesn't matter to me, this is written solely off of my bias and my belief system,
Yeah.
I think that's a problem.
I agree. It's got to be a conversation.
Yes.
And it's, I think very often where companies get this wrong and where leaders get this wrong is a refusal to have these hard conversations. I mean,
That
base camp is the
that's
classic
that's exactly what I'm saying. Oh, yes.
classic
Yes.
example. Like, we won't talk about this. We're not going
Yes.
to talk about politics at work. That means, like,
Garbage.
yeah, that basically means, like, in the game of musical chairs,
Yeah.
if you don't have a chair, you're screwed forever,
That's
because
right.
we're not going
That's
to
right.
talk about it anymore.
That's right. That's
And
right.
and that's no good.
No, I mean, I think you have to have the conversations, and so you get into this point of saying, in order to get to the rules, you got
You
to
got to
get
have
people's.
some,
You,
yeah,
you got to have some really tough conversations along the way, and
yeah,
you got to be able to. So that's where I say to a leader, be ready to lean in and
yeah,
understand. There's points. Watch the room. Watch how people are feeling. Be able to intervene when the conversation starts to go awry,
hmm,
right, and bring it back to the point of a point of what's happening in the room, but create space to open people up to begin to
yeah,
say, this is how I feel about this, and this is why I feel about it
yeah,
the way I feel
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, you're right. Silencing people is not going to work.
There's no bueno.
People
No bueno.
that it just doesn't work. I mean, it's
It doesn't
bad.
work at all.
It's bad and it's ineffective. It's
That's right.
brutally
That's
ineffective.
right. That's right. That's
Um,
right.
at the same time, gosh, there's some people I would like to silence. I just,
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think, this is hard, but
yes,
this is leadership,
yes,
right?
yes,
Leadership is not about, people are not going to respect you simply because you have the title. People
yeah,
respect you because you have really created space for them to talk and to bring their points of view to the table. And ultimately, we're going to walk away agreeing to disagree, maybe.
yeah, yeah. But at least we know where the where the guideline, where the guardrails
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And if and again, this is a privileged point of view. But if I don't like the guardrails, I go work somewhere else. Now that's
That's
not
right.
always possible for everyone. But I mean, I think it's better to know where they
Yes.
are than not to know. Invisible
Look,
guardrails are the worst.
invisible guardrails are the worst. It's also good to know. I mean, I say this all the time, and a lot of my Black friends, we get into very heated debates over this. That when, the last decade that we've had where people have become more emboldened to give their points of view about being racist, I would much rather know where the racists are, so
Yes.
I know where not to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Versus not knowing where they are and having a false sense of safety and a false
Yeah.
security that this whole country has opened up for me.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You're bringing back for me at one point when I was working at Google and I was managing Blogger,
Mm-hmm.
we got into a heated argument
Mm-hmm.
about some policies, about what
Mm-hmm.
was going to be acceptable to say or not say on Blogger. And I, as you can probably tell from this conversation, was in favor of having some pretty some, some pretty strict rules that other people thought were like a violation of free speech. I'm like, this is not free speech. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
not a government, this is not a public square. This is a privately owned thing. And we can
Yeah.
say or not, it's like if we owned a dance hall, would
Yeah.
we allow the KKK to come rent it out? No, we would not. Like, why are
Yeah.
we allowing those voices here?
Yeah.
And I got into a big argument with another executive who really made the point you made. The
Mm-hmm.
whole point of free speech is that you're better off knowing than not knowing.
That's
And
right.
that's true. And at the same time, two things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
That if you platform this stuff, you create, you empower it and enable it and encourage it.
Yes.
And we don't want to do that either.
No, not at all. Because I'm going. I agree, Kim, and I'm going back in my mind to the conversation we had in the last episode of the podcast, which was around when does an upstander go too far,
Yeah.
right? And so if rules are made without regard to how people, without the conversation, I think that sometimes go too far because ultimately, then people are going to be resentful of that.
Yes.
And that resentfulness may be taken out on that underrepresented population.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really important point. Really important point.
Right.
And I think, if we go back to what leaders can do, part of the reason to try to make it clear where the guardrails are and to be honest and open about them, even if that means having some really seriously hard conversations, you make it safer for upstanders to be
Absolutely.
upstanders because
Absolutely.
it can be fair. If there are invisible guardrails, an upstander can do something that they think is like within the bounds of the culture and then wind up getting fired for it. And that is not fair to upstanders.
Absolutely. Everybody has to know what game they're playing, right? Well, how
Yeah.
what are the rules to this thing that we're all encompassing? So I think ultimately you and I are on the same page. I believe that a rule book for respect is important. How we get to that rule book.
How to write it. Gosh. I am really, I'm struggling. I'm struggling with it. But I will continue to struggle.
Well, I think this is the part of being a contemporary 21st century leader, right? It is no longer can you just say it's my way or the highway. Yeah. Now you have to really make room for everyone's point of view and voices to be heard along the way to get to the ultimate point where you're getting the best out of people.
Yeah. Did you read the book Rising Out of Hatred? It's a book about I think David Black was his name.
Okay.
He was a white nationalist, and he was the godson of David Duke or something. I'm going to get my facts wrong, but you get the idea.
I get the idea.
He went off to college, and his beliefs were challenged, and there was when people found out who he was at this university, he was kind of excluded from everything. And one guy invited him to Shabbat dinner.
Yes.
An Orthodox Jewish guy. And he said, my job is not to move. A rabbi had told him, your job is not to move the boulder. Your job is to push against the boulder. Like your job is not to change his belief, but
that's
to
exactly right.
Present other points of view.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful, it's like an incredible story. And that's the work, but like not everybody's willing to do that work. And not everyone at work should have to do that much work, should have to push against the boulder. I think. I don't know, though. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I mean, I would say at work, if we think about the patriarchal systems of oppression and power that corporate America is built on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That every leader has to do this work. This is the work.
To undo that system.
That system, right? And that is having these conversations, and that is leaning into these intense moments. And I completely agree with you. I mean, Kim, I can't tell you how many people who still to this day, when I walk into the room and I walk into a room of all white men on a board, in a boardroom, and the
Mhm.
looks that I get and the processing that I have to process through when I
Yeah.
see dislike, when I see fear, when I see disgust.
Ugh.
But that is not a moment that I step away. That's a moment where I lean in,
Yeah.
and because I feel a responsibility because I have the privilege of being in that room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No,
it,
it
and
is.
it's the privilege of leadership
Yeah, and the burden. I'm
and the
sorry, it's
burden.
awful. It's awful.
It is awful. It
And
is.
it's I mean,
Yeah.
I like, who would have I just can't imagine who would not be delighted to see you walking in the room, so I'm really
Look,
sorry. Those people have some kind of problem.
oh yeah, it's but I mean I appreciate that, Kim, but I will tell you it is more often than I want it to be. And
Yeah,
it is sickening because the number of times I walk into those rooms or I mean, even more so do I walk in those rooms and I'm the only gay person.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And I
yeah,
refuse to not I make sure people not talk about my husband very openly, very quickly when I'm in
yeah,
rooms like that, because I
yeah,
want people to know I'm gay, right? I could hide the fact that I'm gay, but I'm not
yeah,
going
but
to.
yeah, good for you. Good for
I'm
you,
not going
because
to. And
you're an upstander for your community
exactly, absolutely right. And so,
and for
you know,
yourself.
and for myself and for my family and for, yes, absolutely, for all those things. So this is the work. This is the work. And so I think writing this chapter, of course, is going to be hard.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
maybe you start by saying this is the work.
Yeah,
This
this is
chapter.
the work. I don't have the answer here, but
No,
here's some things for you to think about.
that's
And maybe
exactly
you
right.
even maybe one suggestion for leaders is to sit down with their teams and have conversations where things have gone totally off the rails at other places. And
Yes.
what would we do? Like, if what happened at base camp happened at our company, what would we do?
Yeah.
If two people walked in with this t-shirt and that t-shirt, what would we do? And
Hmm.
how would we handle it, and why? And what, can we sort of pull some principles out of, maybe it's, I always forget which is inductive and which is deductive,
Oh yeah.
but maybe it's like
It's
from the details up to the principles, and rather than from the principles down to the details.
well, and the other thing I would say to you is the higher you go in an organization, Kim, you know this as well. The higher you go, the farther you get away from the real culture of the company.
Yeah, yeah, you're the
Right.
last to know what's
You're
really
the last to
happening.
know, right? And so if you're establishing a rule book for your direct work team, I would actually
Mhm.
say maybe before you do that, you go talk to some folks deeper in the organization
Yeah,
to understand what's happening, because maybe your rule book needs to be written on the actual culture and
yeah.
not the perceived culture of this leadership
Yeah,
team.
not what you imagine it's
That's
like, what
exactly
it's
right.
really like. Because very often as a leader, you're like, when I'm in charge, none
Yes.
of this bad shit will happen." And of course, just because 'cause you're in charge doesn't mean human nature underneath you has changed even one little bit, you
It
know,
just means people are hiding
or
it from you.
history.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly,
Very much
exactly.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Ernest, as always, you help me think more clearly about this. Thank you so much.
No, this was a good conversation. I appreciate you being open to challenge here. I appreciate you being open to thinking about this. And as you write this chapter, I'm excited to continue to talk to you and see what comes out on the other side of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit down tonight and do a rewrite and send it to you, so get
Okay,
ready.
great. All right,
Get
can't
ready.
wait. Can't wait.
All right.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
so
thanks
much.
for
And parting thoughts on Black History. How do you feel about Black History Month?
look, I sent a text to my family this morning for our listeners. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and so and my
Wow.
mom is 86 and still alive and still with us. So we're very blessed. So the 8 of us have a group text, and so I sent a
Mhm,
text to them this morning that started out by saying I have a love hate relationship with Black History Month.
mhm.
But I acknowledge Black History Month because of the people who fought for us to have
Yeah,
this month,
yeah,
and the respect for the recognition that there is a need to discuss Black history in a more open setting in the country.
yeah,
My hate comes from how people slap their logos on it, or people come and talk to me about Black History Month and then don't say anything else to me about being Black any other time of year.
yeah, yeah.
And I
It feels like a Hallmark holiday, almost like
absolutely,
Valentine's Day or something.
yeah, I think in the world that we live in now has been very commercialized, and that was not the original intent. But so every chance I get to talk about it, yes, it is Black History Month. Yes, I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud of my ancestors who fought and gave their lives in instances for us to have this month to be able to celebrate it.
Yeah.
And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. So
Yeah. Yeah. That, well, I am grateful to your ancestors as well. It's important. It's
yes, it's
important to
important. It
talk
is
about it.
important.
And it's important to push, it's just like, uh, when you feel like on Mother's Day or Father's Day or Valentine's Day, like, oh, I have to get the card, but like, do I really want to have this person who I love feel like I'm neglecting them? So
Yes,
it's
exactly.
important. It's important to do the right thing and
Yeah,
to
yeah.
acknowledge.
It's challenging because I woke up to an article about the AP, the AP course of African American history, that they have now decided to remove a lot of the critical race theory and a lot of the
Oh
authors
gosh, are you
and a lot
kidding?
of the no, they rewrote the course and stripped it down in a significant way. And I was just like, wow, what a
Who
disservice.
did this?
The AP course, so
Oh,
the high
really?
school course.
And
Yeah,
oh
so I
my
forgot that.
gosh.
Yeah, so it's very, very challenging. Like, that's the first article I see this morning as I as I
Oh,
log on, and I was like, wow, happy Black History Month. We're gonna
that is
strip down Black
horrible.
history to the point that it makes white people feel comfortable. And we're not gonna talk about
Yeah, we have got to learn to feel uncomfortable. I mean, because
yes.
you know what? It is like, eh, it's
Yeah,
awful. The history is an awful, awful history.
it is. And it's like,
Um,
why does me why because why me celebrating my history, why
mhm.
does that demoralize you or make
Yeah,
your existence any less than? It
yeah, it's ridiculous.
it's
It's
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
All
So
right, well, let's go change it, Ernest.
absolutely. Onward
All
we
right.
go.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
All
Kim.
right. Take care. Be well.